welcome back to the world today. Mike Ryan here. Enjoyed the protagonists very, very much indeed, and guests from not only from the UK but from Hawaii. Harry Miller is CEO of Fair Cop, and he's our next guest. On January 25, between 2,000 and 3,000 locals marched through East Sussex's Crowborough to oppose the Home Office use of the discussed Crowborough Training Camp for up to 500 single adult male asylum seekers aged 18 to 65. The first 27 men arrived on January 22, as just over a week ago, as part of the Labor government's effort to cut hotel costs from a level of £9 million daily. Residents worry about safety for women and children, lack of consultation, and policing expenses topping 5.6 million quid. The Home Office points to 24/7 security, NHS care and support services. For many reasons, the site is inappropriate and legal action could follow. Our guest, as I said, is Harry Miller. We'll talk to Harry about some of these issues, including public safety. And Harry, by the way, is a former police officer and now the co-chief executive officer at Fair Cop, a group of individuals who have come together over shared concerns about police attempts to criminalise people for expressing opinions that don't contravene any laws. Harry, thanks for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure, my friend. I always enjoy your show.
Thank you very much. I'm just thinking not what I'm thinking. What was the government thinking about deciding to make a ex-military camp into a place where they're going to plonk a whole bunch of many undocumented migrants? And they talk about security. How the hell will they control, 800 plus migrants as it grows?
Well, they won't. That's the whole point. They're not going to control it at all, are they? I mean, on a practical point of view, I can see why they do use old army work, army camps, because the buildings are already there, there's structure, and all the rest of it. But it sends a message, doesn't it? I think that's the larger point. It sends a message that this government doesn't value the military. It certainly doesn't value its veterans. It looks down upon its veterans when it's not, of course, seeking to prosecute them for so-called indiscretions and war crimes from the past. And it sends the very clear message that if you want to be treated as a first-class citizen in this country, get housing, get access to medical care, get security, feel safe, get food and water, get clothing, get a mobile phone, get it all paid for, then the best thing that you can do is fly over to France, pay somebody to get you on a small boat and bring you back, destroy your passport on the way, come back and then claim that you are fleeing some war-torn part of the world, and you'll get looked after entirely. And then even worse, anybody that protests this, anybody who says, hold on a minute, this is perhaps not a good idea, anybody that dares go out onto the street as part of an organised process, you'll be treated as a second-class citizen, and the police will view you as a criminal or a potential criminal. And of course, you may end up getting free accommodation as well, but that will be at His Majesty's pleasure down at the local police station, followed by jail. This is where we're at. We are in a complete and utter upside-down world in Britain right now, and I think increasingly, this is more by design than by accident. I used to think that it was all accidental. I used to think it was by the result of just sheer incompetence, good people being rubbish at their jobs. I'm less inclined to think that now, because it just keeps happening and happening and happening, and the government and the police don't seem to be learning any lessons at all. So I conclude reluctantly there is a degree of conspiracy going on here, that this is by design, not by accident.
And just the talk of vigilante groups would make any cop a bit nervous, because you have these large groups of people most likely with good intentions, but it can get out of hand. The law should be left to the cops, but if you're forming a vigilante group, would mean that you haven't got a whole lot of faith in law and order.
Well, that's problem. I mean, I'm entirely against vigilante groups. I think that's a road to hell, in all honesty. And let's be clear: regular police officers want to do regular policing. Police officers, by and large, join the job because they want to feel the collar of the bad guy and lock them up. They want to go out there and keep the public safe. That's why most police officers join up. The problem is, once you're joined up, you're then subject to a non-stop series of propagandizing, where looking after the general public becomes secondary to something much more sinister, much more ideological, and much more political. And so even good cops end up, unfortunately, subject to the ideological nuances and agenda of the chief constable of the government, etc. But vigilante groups are not the way to go. What we need to do is we need police forces, chief constables, to recognise that protesting is a fundamental part of being democratic. If you're in a healthy democracy, you have the right to protest. Now, we know what an unhealthy democracy or a no democracy looks like by looking over at Iran, where there's been something like, I don't know, what was the last figure that I saw? Something like 20,000 protesters slaughtered by the regime simply because they went out and protested. So one of the marks of any healthy democracy, any healthy state, is that the police not only allow the public to demonstrate, but make it safe for them to do so. We have another problem in this country right now, where the police think that keeping people safe is the be all and end all. That's the reason why there was mooted for the Tel Aviv Maccabi fans being banned from attending a football match in Birmingham on the basis of safety. Last year, we had a Jew who was arrested on his own doorstep because he stepped out of his house just as a parade of pro-Palestinians were passing by, and the police arrested the Jew for his own safety. Well, it's not the job of the police to ensure safety. The best way of keeping everybody safe is to ban all public gatherings and to have a curfew. No, it's the job of the police to allow people to go about their lawful business, whether that's leaving your front door and crossing the street whilst there's a protest going on, or being, in fact, part and parcel of a protest. It's the job of the police to facilitate that and to reduce the risk. It's not the job of the police to keep everybody 100% safe, because that's impossible. And the cost of doing that, of course, is a complete and utter restriction of our freedoms. But the police don't seem to understand this.
Tell me if I'm wrong here. Your departments are, you got uniform, you got plain clothes, which are detectives. Then you have Scotland Yard, which is a bit like the FBI, I suppose.
No. Scotland Yard is basically the detective agency of the Metropolitan Police.
Okay, so
it doesn't have a national remit, no.
Okay, I'll have to. Lucky my dad's not alive; he would have footed me up the backside for getting that one wrong. But so you have Scotland Yard, and then to back that up, you got MI5, which looks after internal issues. Can you tell me why the government's looking at having a British FBI?
Well, again, we've already got a so-called British FBI. In 2013, the government set up the National Crime Agency, which was touted as being the British FBI. The problem with the National Crime Agency is nobody knows really what it is or what it does. It's never entered the national consciousness. I don't really think politicians view it as particularly important. So it's got a huge budget. I think it's got a budget of around about 890 million quid. But what does it do? what does it do? None of us really know. So I think what the Home Office, they've looked and thought, this great idea, it doesn't seem to have worked. I know. Let's have a reboot, and this time we'll call it the British FBI. I think that's what's going on here. But again, it's it's not going to work. It's not going to work. We don't have an American federal system in this country. We have 43 individual police forces. What we do need, if we want to tackle national crime, grooming gangs, fraud, conspiracies, etc., then we need chief constables to talk to each other. We need Scotland Yard down in the Met to talk to the CID departments in the non-metropolitan police forces, but they don't. Police forces in this country are notorious for not sharing information. They're notorious for keeping the intelligence to themselves. They're very territorial, and that's one of the things that needs to stop. But that's as much about culture and practice. I don't think we need a brand new agency to sort that out. The other thing, of course, is by having an FBI, a federal type police force, it fundamentally changes the nature of policing, because policing in the UK, it's not government led, it's people led. We don't have a Home Secretary who directs the police. We have chief constables who direct their own police forces, and so I'm quite reluctant to promote the idea of having a national government-led, Home Secretary-led police force, because I think it shifts us in a direction that I don't want to go. That we increase the risk of the police force becoming a political entity rather than an entity of the public, which serves the public and helps to detect crime. Now, I'm open to persuasion on this, Mike. I really am. I'm not an absolute fundamentalist, but I'm yet to see an argument for a British FBI when we have the model of the NCA, National Crime Agency, which has failed.
Okay, so I'll read this to you. The National Police Service, NPS, will fight complex and serious crime, such as terrorism, fraud, and organised crime, in order to give overstretched local forces more time to focus on everyday offences, such as hello, shoplifting and phone theft. The NPS will, now you just behave yourself, just tie yourself to the chair. The NPS will combine the work of the National Crime Agency and regional organised crime units under one super force. So we have the boys in blue. What they'll be doing is making sure there are less shoplifters on the street and shops, and no more phone theft. Just from this alone, it would seem that they have sort of patted down the seriousness of crime and some of the crime, because to say shoplifting and phone theft is what the boys in blue will do now is a bit demeaning, because I thought they would have done more than just stop people from shoplifting or stealing your phone.
Yeah, again, that's a straw man argument, because there is not a police officer in the UK who thinks, "Oh my goodness, what do I do? Today, am I going to be tackling county lines gangs on national, or shall I go down and deal with local shop theft?" That's not how policing works. It's frontline police officers, response officers, who deal with the everyday crimes that you and I are concerned with. These officers who are involved in the big, large, organised crime, they don't spend any time at all. They're not available to go down to see the local shopkeeper because there's been a burglary or a shoplifting. That's a nonsense argument. What we need to do is we definitely do need a joined up national agency of some description, not directed by the Home Office, but directed by chief constables who are working together so they can get the job done. But it's the local response officer who goes out and deals with the everyday crime. And the reason that one of the ways that we free them up to do that is by getting rid of the endless paperwork that they have to do, by withdrawing them from being frontline mental health nurses, because that's what happens for most officers. They start their shift, and then there's some lunatic kicking off and claiming to have a mental health crisis, and all that needs to happen is for them to say, "Oh, I feel a little bit suicidal." And then they have to take the police officer then has to take them to hospital. Now hospitals are overstretched, so the police officer then spends a full 12-hour shift babysitting the person that thinks they've got mental health problems. And of course, it's that officer who should be out there visiting the person who's been recently burgled or the person who's been shoplifted, but they can't because they're on babysitting duties. So we need to sort that out. The other thing that we need to sort out is in this country we have, I think it's 150,000 police officers there or thereabouts. But get this, 4,000 a day are off sick. And then there's another 17,000 who are suspended. That's 1 in 6 police officers that we have on the books who's not available for duty. That's absolutely appalling. So we need to sort that out. Now, of course, if a police officer's done something wrong, then it's right that they are put through disciplinary, of course. But at the moment, it's taking 2 or 3 years to get a police officer through disciplinary. 2 or 3 years where they are on full pay, but not doing a scrap of work. We need to shorten that length of time to 3 months. It's as simple as that. And then you're either bound to have not committed some horrible, gross misconduct, and so you're back on the street, or we get rid of you and replace you with a new copper. That's what needs to happen. Having this new FBI isn't going to solve any of that. So you and I are not going to feel any safer at all. So the answer here, it's a civil service answer. It's a political answer to a very real problem. And of course, politicians and civil servants very often get it wrong because they're not dealing with life as it is. They're not dealing with policing as it is. They're inventing it from their la land version of policing.
Are you afraid that the UK will be over surveilled? I mean, I just saw that you're plonking all these cameras around run by AI. What could possibly go wrong? I mean, if you have a camera on every corner, and that's what the government is suggesting just about, what's the point of living?
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I'm a recent convert to this actually, because it had always been my view that, you know, I don't care who surveils me because I'm not doing anything wrong. But my stance has changed quite a lot over the last few years because I've seen that the government and the police are not politically neutral. They're not necessarily benign, and that information, which is technically, which I suppose in some ways could be seen as neutral, can be weaponized against you. I mean, I back in 2019. I simply wrote on Twitter that men can't become women, and this was surveilled by the police, and I became the subject to a massive police inquiry. I ended up, of course, taking the police to court and winning, but that's not the point. So a few years ago, I couldn't imagine a world where, if you weren't doing anything unlawful, the police would take an interest in you. But now, unfortunately, I can. So I think this rush to surveillance is a bad thing. And of course, the government are quite clever because what they're doing is they're getting you and I to spy on each other. So we saw this during the COVID lockdown, where people were actively encouraged to snitch upon any neighbour that happened to go for an unwarranted walk. Even if you didn't stand on the doorstep on a Thursday night and clap the NHS, there was a chance that a neighbour would notice your absence and report you. So we're not in a position now where we can trust where we can trust the government not to weaponise our neighbour. I mean, ring doorbells and things like that. Surveillance is all over the place, and of course, the government encourage this because, you need to see when you're away on a holiday, you need to see who's at your front door. Well, I don't give a toss who's at my front door when I'm on holiday. I don't want to see a ring doorbell, but these things are becoming absolutely prolific, and of course, the police then are able to secure that intelligence. And there's no way you can go, nothing that you can do where you are not being surveilled. And of course, I think that's a terrible thing.
I suppose one good thing, you'll have some much slimmer, coppers around because they'll see how many times they visit McDonald's. And I can see because I mean here in Victoria, you always know. You see the you've got what has it got lights and bells or sirens, and they're racing down. They're heading to Macca's because they're about to shut shop or something that for the night. Where do you see the future of policing in the UK as we wrap this up?
Well, I've said to you before, I'm an eternal optimist. Actually, Mike, I do weirdly think that our current Home Secretary, albeit that she's a Labour Home Secretary, I think her heart's actually in the right place. I don't think she's a terrible Home Secretary. I think we've had far worse. So, she's recently got rid of non-crime hate incidents, for instance. So she's been very sound on that. I am taking her to court. Of course, we've got a judicial review lodged with the High Court because we've discovered that police forces are recording people for actual crimes, not non-crimes, but recording people for actual crimes on the basis of no evidence at all, on the basis purely of somebody putting in a complaint that you're a hater. So we're going to take her to court over that, but hopefully we'll get that sorted and we'll get that guidance. Scrapped. So I'm relatively optimistic, but then again, I have to be, because if I wasn't optimistic, I'd pack all this in and just walk away and just watch Netflix
or Prime.
Yeah,
actually, a lot of good English cop shows too. Crime is a good series. A bit Scottish for my liking, if you've ever seen it, but it's because I can't understand what they're saying half the time, but really good. You would see.
I like the Sweden, Mike. I like it. I like it when coppers are grabbing the bad guys and throwing them over the hood of the Cortina and saying, "Don't upset me. I've not had my breakfast yet." Before sort of nutting them.
I'm going to tell you a really funny story that I'm not supposed to tell anyone. My dad was a copper, and when he first started off in Victoria, he was in headquarters in Melbourne at Russell Street, and anyway, he's only just joined the police force, and he was a young guy there, and all the detectives who were doing the interrogating of this particular guy, the detectives in the 50s, they were very large guys. You wouldn't want to say boo to them. Large guys, not much hair and big necks and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, they grabbed this guy and threw him on the table. Nicely, of course, not. Anyway, he slid out the window, and they grabbed his feet because he was like 16 floors up. So anyway, I thought that was and they yelled out, "Quick, he's trying to escape." So there's a story my dad said, never tell anybody, but I think you could probably relate to that. Do you think cops are better now than they were before?
No, I don't actually, and I think that's not the cops' fault. I think that's because they've been overburdened with a load of nonsense by complete idiot bosses. I mean, a police officer's only got so much storage capacity in their brain, and when it's been taken over with diversity, equality, and inclusion nonsense, then there's no room in there for learning. The definitions of law, for instance. I can still remember definitions of crimes, and police officers should be able to say off pat, on demand, the definition for all the most common crimes that they are dealing with. They can't. What they can tell you, of course, is their pronouns. What they can tell you, of course, is when it's Transgender Day of Remembrance, because their heads have been filled with this complete utter crap, and it comes at the expense of understanding what the law is and what their duty is to uphold the law. It's their duty. It's the police officer's duty to uphold the law. It's not the police officer's duty to uphold pronouns, to uphold politics, to uphold guidance. It's not their role, but police officers don't understand that, and it's not the young'un's fault. It's
Are
the
they
boss.
caught in the last question, very serious here. Part of the intensive training would be how to say hello, hello, hello. Is that about right?
Well, of course, you don't get a chance to say hello, hello, hello anymore because police officers aren't as a rule, encouraged to meet members of the public. So,
And very true too, very true. You would have liked my dad. He told a few porkies, but most of it was true. Harry Miller, CEO of Fair Cop. If somebody wants to find out more about you or Fair Cop, how do they do that?
just go onto X and look up We Are Fair Cop. You'll find us on there.
Harry, always a pleasure. Got to do this more often now that we have longer hours. Harry Miller, thank you so much for your time. This is The World Today.
Makers are facing more travel.
When we're on the go, it's easy to go into our own world. Keep your mind on the road.
Our beautiful world is changing, withering, dying by the hands of those who don't value nature, even though we all depend on it for life itself. But there is hope. Together with caring friends, the Nature Conservancy can restore our lands, heal our waters, and save our wildlife with big solutions only nature can provide. But every day we lose more of the places we love, and we urgently need to save endangered lands, waters, and wild species. The actions we take today will determine the tomorrow we leave to our children and grandchildren. The water they drink, the air they breathe, the beauty they experience. To learn more about how you can help protect and conserve our beautiful world, visit nature.org today.
Asthma is a growing problem, especially among children. Asthma affects the quality of life for millions like me every single day. My name is Chris Draft, and I have asthma. And I've spent more than a decade in the NFL tackling asthma on and off the field. Join me in the EPA in helping people control their asthma. Asthma is a lung condition that can be controlled through medication and by avoiding things that can make it worse. 3 steps are the solution to controlling asthma. Step 1, talk to a doctor. Step 2, make a plan. And step 3, get rid of things that can make it worse. Asthma can be tackled. For more information on asthma, log on to epa.gov/asthma.
We're today's News Talk, The World Today.
And back, yesterday we had a great conversation, and it was cut short. We just ran out of time with Robert Sibbers, talking about alternative media, independent media, how they're all sort of all over the place. Robert, by the way, is a producer, director, and author of films, documentaries, and TV shows, as well as a book publisher and editor-in-chief of Oval Media. Now, he's made his mission to convey a new perspective on power mechanics. His goal is to foster active citizenship by providing a deeper understanding of the world through a variety of media. Robert, thanks for joining us once again.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Mike.
Tell me, because we're talking about independent media, which is more dangerous in this day and age, independent or alt media or legacy media?
You mean dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, which can do more damage, because at least with legacy we know where we know who the villains are. Mainly, we know that they're funded by a lot of organisations we don't really like. Independent media, we don't know who funds them, so therefore their agenda or their narrative, at many times, is it follows the direction or the directive from those providing the funds.
It is true that you have hidden players everywhere, also in what is called alternative media. And it is true that you have hidden players in legacy media too, and you have different kinds of people. So there are people who just believe what the government says, and this portion of our population is decreasing, getting smaller every day. So there's a problem, and that problem, I mean, for the dominating narrative, and people become critical, but the people who are in charge, who are giving, this main narrative, are not stupid. They have advice. They know how to deal with dissent. At least there are strategies, and these strategies are to control the dissent too. So you just and this is why sometimes what sounds like criticism is in fact a diversion of attention. Sometimes I just give you a simple example. Instead of saying, look, this technocracy is a problem, or this transhumanism is in fact anti-humanism, and can be dangerous to our health, can be dangerous to our liberties, you would say the problem is the digital world. Everything which is digital is a problem. And in fact, that is not true. See what you are doing, Mike. Your work is digital. And because we have these digital means, we have means for democracy, for debate, for open-mindedness, means to think faster, to get information out faster, to research easier. So in fact, I think that digitalization of the world is an extremely liberating, and is giving us freedom. So that's a problem for some people, because some people have an agenda which is in fact putting us into a tiny system, putting us into a world with less freedom and more control. And they, of course, want to use these tools against us. But it's not the problem are not the tools. So this is just one example, but there are a lot of examples where, and I just had this conversation with my partner, saying, Karl Marx, you remember this guy? He said the problem is the industrialization of the world, and this makes the workers to slaves, which is not true. The industrialization and modern technology gave wealth to a lot of people, to a broader part of the population, and it gave also more importance to the workers, because the owners of the factories were in a way also dependent to the workers. So compared to the system before the industrial world, the regular citizen had more power. And this is, so it is not true. I think that Karl Marx maybe was not that honest, in fact, even though, yes, at the end, the people who had the power, that shouldn't be, used their power to build a system in which, and today, if we talk about today, the digital world is still under control. And the world is now more under control than it has been 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Don't you think so?
Yeah, I do. And I think in the EU, throughout Europe, the democracy shield to protect its citizens from this barrage of misinformation. How dangerous is that?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, I couldn't even fathom what is happening here. I mean, you might have heard of the case of Jacques Baud, the Swiss citizen who has frozen assets, bank accounts frozen, is not allowed to move anymore. He lives in Brussels, and he is the perfect example of a good journalist, because he is documenting everything he's saying, and he's using, interestingly, mostly Western sources to describe what is happening in Ukraine, and it's still extremely critical. I mean, this is why it's dangerous, because his publications are based on facts. And to attack this guy saying, look, what you are doing is Russian propaganda, is, of course, weird. In addition to this, even if he did do Russian propaganda, even if it would be pro-Putin and whatever, it would not, of course, give the European Commission the right to express sanctions against the Swiss citizen. It's completely absurd. I have the right to defend Putin if I were in a democracy. I could have these opinions. It is not illegal to like somebody or to dislike somebody. It's not even illegal to love somebody or to hate somebody. So to call this is, of course, why is the European Commission doing this? The main reason is that it's having a strong impression on everybody else. So it's frightening people saying, look, if I now would say Putin might be right on this or that, I will be sanctions or I will have other problems. And the fact that this is so anti-constitutional, that this is so illegal, in fact, what the European Commission is doing, is in fact part of this narrative. They can do everything. They will get away with everything. So I cannot oppose them because they don't respect their own laws.
And I'm just thinking it's pretty hard out there if you think about it. You got, on one hand, you got government trying to do all they can to stop you from talking, shut you up, and then on the other hand, you have for example, look at X, free speech platform, and you can say what you like. What they do is distort the actual facts. So therefore, if it's selective speech, so if you're on the same wavelength as say Elon is, then you will maybe enjoy some of the riches or some of the notoriety by having good numbers. Look at us, for example. I don't know whether we'll ever get to 400. It's been bobbing around on 90 for 390. Can you believe it? Yeah. And we were part of TNT radio, TNT, and we took we just moved it across. Now, in that time, TNT had X. It reached 12,300 about 2 years before it stopped, and it stayed on 12,300.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same thing happened to us. And Mike, what you are doing is free speech, and what X is doing is, in fact, a diversion. I mean, if I would start every post with a praise of Elon Musk, I would get chances, of having more visibility. If, however, I would criticize him, it's a problem. And we had the same issues. And no, they do content filtering, and this is not my research result, which would be investigative. They're saying it themselves. It's not neutral at all, and they're not claiming to be so. It is the same thing. You have this Pepsi and Coke story. You have this, red and blue and black and white. This opposition between X and let's say Facebook and other platforms is not the real opposition. It is not giving real freedom of thinking. It is important for people to really understand that if you want to have free thinking, you need really independent platforms, and they are rare, and they're getting so rare. And I think what you are doing is free, and one means also to attack a platform is to do as if nobody would see it. So then you would, if you had millions of views on various American platforms, you can say, look, you have to come to our show, Mr. President or Mr. Prime Minister, and they would come because you have this audience. So maybe you have this audience, but they can, trick with the platforms, and then they say, look, you're small, you're not important. And there's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Are you important? Are you unimportant? It depends on how you're perceived on their platforms. And this is something we have to change. We have to, if we want real independence in debate and in thinking, we shouldn't depend our judgment on what is written on Wikipedia or how many followers you have on X.
Yeah, we have on X. I got tired one day and I was told, don't be stupid, I can't help it. Sometimes I like to call it as it is. And we actually, in our little description, the world today looks very pretty. And I said, we are tier 1 on X, which means X would like us to disappear or jump into a volcano. And that's what it is. And we went,
it means so you're relevant.
Well, Rob said the same thing. Said we were extreme. We were an extreme organisation from right back to TNT, And we were extreme. We had both sides having a voice, and they didn't like that. So we're either extreme for one or the other, so it never worked out for us. What was funny though, because the people we employed, they were just brilliant. But most of them had been deplatformed and on Twitter and Facebook and all those, YouTube, and they're doing well right now, and we're not. We would never be able to get away from those algorithms. YouTube's another one, until you can afford to have store your own videos and stuff, which we're hopefully getting there, but I don't think so at times. But it's really interesting that that YouTube. We actually were watching it one day, and our numbers were, we hit 20 because we don't believe the numbers at all, and we're talking about trans issues, in Australia, and when we saw it, that the number went up, because said nobody's watching you. It's a very hot topic, so they were, and the people we had on were very, very good, but it got to 23 and then went down to 20. And then got up to 24, went down to 20, and then we saw these. And then even with Jen was watching something the other night, and she told me, she said, "Look, this is I'm seeing our numbers disappear." And another one we had went to bed last night. It was like 700 or something, or 680 or something, and it had dropped about 40. And views don't just disappear. I mean, it's a view. So I think if they want to get you, I mean, we're not liked by, we weren't liked, or we're not liked now by legacy media, government, and a lot of people on the alt media side, because we just don't play the games. It's the same thing with you. I mean, if you don't follow a clueless person's agenda, and then they want to come back and create havoc for you, they can. So we're, no matter what we do, at times we're going to be bashed on the head, and we're going to be buried, and petrol poured over us and stuff. And I think, well, all we can do is just tell it as it is. Quality of our program is pretty bloody good, I think. But according to, and even Rumble, we had Dolores Cahill on when we were at Asia Pacific Today, and Dolores had like 450,000 views. I checked it, a year later. You just want to go back and admire your handiwork, and it was like 250. So they knocked off like 200,000. So all the social medias that we all rely on, you are subject to their censorship, aren't you?
Oh yes, we all are, and it's really impressive, because what you're describing is in fact a dangerous game. It could, it could happen that people would see it. So the question is, why are you so important? Why is your work so important, Mike? And I was quite prepared to understand this because in 2019 I started filming with Chinese dissidents in Berlin, and I was very much impressed, for instance, how much persecution a bookseller would have because he would sell books by poets, and how poets would be put into a horrible prison and would need to stay there and would be raped there and would sleep on the floor with tens and tens of people. It was just a nightmare of their life, and said, just because you wrote a poem, And in fact, yes, because if the government is implementing measures which are obviously against the interest of everybody, or nearly everybody in the country, then just to think, just to have a second opinion, just to have a little bit of freedom in the discussion can be a huge problem, because information travels fast, especially in the digital age. So they have to, inhibit your job, and maybe also mine, at the earliest stage possible, because they know you can be dangerous, Mike, and what you're doing. And this is the thing. The viewers have to see this too, that thinking is dangerous, and that the prohibition of thinking is in fact the result to it. And the question is, what is happening? What is so much against the common interest? I think we are in a disruptive era where the structures of governments are completely revolved, where we have different responsibilities, new laws, and more centralization of power, and where we have also a new center of world power, which will be rather in China than in other areas. But this is not really changing the dominating people. I think mainly the domination in China makes China a tool, but still to the same people who dominated the world before. So these kind of information, these kind of thoughts are rare, even in alternative media. And I think it is because people are influencing alternative media. Yesterday, we had an interesting discussion. And because we said, look, it's not just about platforms. It's also about people who would then, either do sabotage to media, occupy their thoughts, occupy their time. People who would come to work saying they would like to help, and then they're not helping, but hindering, the progress of projects. You have a lot of tiny things, and I needed months and months to understand that people would take the energy to fight what I would do. I mean, how important am I? I mean, just one person, or we are just this little team. But then I learned, more and more about what happened in Eastern Germany during the dictatorship while we had the Cold War. And in fact, they had people paid full time to just observe a painter who would have exhibits in his town, a small multiplier of ideas, and it would be enough to pay people to observe him. I think, what a waste of energy. No, it's not, because you cannot have dissent if the government works against everybody.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild world out there, isn't it? And we, and yourself, there's people would like to release some stories in print and stuff, which we've chatted about off camera, but we have to be very careful, because we ain't got deep pockets. But I think though one day, and these people that probably watching, because we looked at our stats last night, it was amazing. People in London, of course, which is fine, and in Thailand. A couple of people there, they were watching it. So I wonder, anyway, must be because you have something
funny.
It must be.
I mean, I like to be watched. That's okay. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, look at me.
To my defense, most of my media work, I did it behind the camera. It was just in 2020 when we got attacked that I said to myself, I had to talk. I have to ask questions instead of being filmed, and people need to know me, because then they can't attack me anymore. So no, I'm happy if I'm not watched too. I just like to do media work, and it is true. We are watched. It's really, but take it as a compliment, Mike. It just says what you do is relevant. I mean, that's a good feeling, isn't it?
It will all come out, but at the meantime, we have to eat, and it's very hard. So it's very hard. I can tell you now, Robert, it's a very hard life at the moment. Because we just about met every as they would say in Australia, we met just about every bastard you could find, and they did some terrible, terrible things to us. We didn't say a word, but one day we will, and not too far down the track. But more important things, we need to make sure that we keep going, and that you do the right thing by people.
You're right. I mean, this lawfare is a weapon, and I experienced this. I yesterday I thought a little bit about it. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose, but if you go into a conflict before a tribunal and you have to pay a lawyer, I mean, it can already bankrupt you, or at least take all your means, and this is hindering projects to progress. It is so simple if a person has a lot of money to hinder you what you do. It's impressive. It's really impressive.
It's a scary life. We need to do this on a regular basis. Reaction.
Yes, we have.
if somebody wants to, did this last night, like deja vu. If somebody wants to find out more about you, Robert, how do they do that?
Yeah, we still have our website, oval.media, but I'm also on all other platforms, even though we might be more shadow banned. So I have a Substack, and we also have, we can find us everywhere. Yeah, best is to go to our mailing list, and best is to subscribe.
And have a scotch if you can afford it. Robert Sibis from Oval Media, thank you so much for your time. That's about it, folks, for yet another exciting episode of The Protagonist and The World Today. Catch you again tomorrow, same time, same place, same telephone box, God willing, and have a great night or a great day. This is The World Today.